Hi, Helena.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa.
Good morning.
Julie, we are expecting Julian, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, I'll just give him a few minutes. Well, just in case Julian has got tied up elsewhere, I think that we will make a start. So welcome to November's board meeting. We have a couple of observers for the meeting today, which I'd like to just give a warm welcome to. First of all, Leanne Joyce is joining us from Essex Partnership University Trust. Welcome to the meeting, Leanne. And also Sophia Jaxes from Signet Health will be observing today's meeting as well. So welcome today. I just wanted to say that at 11 o'clock today, we will stop whichever point of the agenda that we've reached for 2 minutes silence. I know that Sally's also got to step out just before that time. So if we are engrossed in something and I cut across the person that's speaking at that moment, please do accept my apologies in advance. I'm not being rude, but we'll try and stick to 11 o'clock. Julie, do we have any apologies for the meeting apart from Sonia, who you said was having difficulties dialing in?
Yeah, no, that's the only apologies I've got.
Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed. She might be able to join us at some point. Do we have any declarations of any other business for today's meeting? No, that's good. And any declarations of interest, amendments to the register or the agenda items for today? No, that's good. So the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of September, are there any corrections or amendments needed to those, or were they an accurate record? Got a few nodding heads around the piece. I'll take that as accepted. Then the action log and matters arising are either on the agenda today from what I could see, or will be coming forward in the coming months.
Mark?
Sally?
Could I just ask, poor Teresa, I wanted to ask Teresa about the matters of the action 25157, and it was a point I raised, Teresa, and it was around, it's related to the project when we're looking at the high numbers of people detained under the Mental Health Act, and I asked around whether there was any discussion around that. And in the actions, it says something around that there was discussion at the team meeting. Is that right? Am I right there?
You are, yes.
Can I ask you whether there's ever been any discussion around some sort of input around unconscious bias?
Yes, certainly that's something that Gary Fontalaki, the clinical director that attended on my behalf last meeting, Sally, has taken back to the steering group.
Right.
So working that through and understanding from what does the data tell us compared to what is the sort of the team narrative.
Yes.
Around these type of patients and what can be helpful.
Right. I was thinking also, Teresa, around sort of training or, some sort of input around unconscious bias. Do we do that as a trust or for specific teams?
We certainly have done it more in relation to recruitment, Sally, but it's certainly something I can back up with the division to understand, are they doing any particular training? I think it's weaved through the work they're doing around psychosocial interventions, but not as a standalone training.
Right. I'd be very interested. I mean, I'm not saying they should have some input around unconscious bias, but whether there's some consideration of the input around unconscious bias.
Yeah, certainly. Let me pick that up with the team and also with the Nurse Consultant Network that are driving the training programme, particularly in our mental health space.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Perhaps, Teresa, if you could send something round outside of the board before the next meeting, as well as capture that in the minutes, would be useful.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. So now we come on to our board story and the patient story. A warm welcome to Helena Gruenstern and Lisa Ellis. We're looking forward to your presentation this morning. Debbie, do you want to do an introduction to this?
No, I'm going to hand straight over to Lisa and Helena. It's community neuro rehab team story today, and we have got a patient video as part of that, but I won't steal their thunder. I'm going to hand straight over to them.
That's great, thank you.
Problem. Thank you very much for having us at the meeting this morning. Helena is going to take us through the presentation, and then I'll be around as well if there are any questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will just share the slides and also make sure that I've got my sound shared. Okay. There we go. I think that should be sharing. So yeah, thank you very much for having me today. As has been said, I'm Helena. I'm one of the speech and language therapists working in the earlier supported discharge team within the community neuro rehab team, seeing people with a range of neurological conditions such as stroke, Parkinson's disease, motor neuron disease, and many more. The team is made up of OTs, physios, speech therapists, nurses, admin, therapy assistants, and psychologists. And we're a goals-led service. And yeah, Lisa's here to support with any questions afterwards. But today I will be sharing a patient's story of her experience of her recovery following a stroke. So as a bit of background, Elaine qualified as a nurse in 1976, and she later became a hypnotherapist working with both adults and children in a variety of conditions, but with a special interest in children. And she wrote many articles, did public speaking and interviews, as well as publishing a book on children's eating. In May 2021, she had a large stroke, which left her with global aphasia, which is a language difficulty affecting her understanding of what people say, as well as difficulties with her own spoken output, and severe apraxia of speech, which is a motor speech disorder, which affects the actual formation of each sound. So both these speech and language difficulties impacted her ability to communicate her basic needs, her wishes, as well as participating in conversations and social activities. So a really massive impact and a life-changing event. And these are just a few of the communities that supported Elaine through her stroke journey so far. Different ones have been of importance to Elaine at different times along the way. Specifically from our team, she had interventions from all disciplines, so psychology, physio, OT, and speech therapy, as well as seeing our therapy assistants. She had blocks of intervention with CBNRT over the 3 years since her stroke, which focused on impairment, activity, and participation areas of therapy, which is recommended by the World Health Organization's model of rehab. And the interventions always targeted her goals at that time. So Elaine's goals for the first intervention was to walk into a cafe and say coffee to order a drink. And also alongside that, we worked on her self-confidence and worth to be seen by others or the public outside of the home, as initially she didn't want to go anywhere and didn't want anyone to see her. So that was a really full MDT goal. And then the second referral came from a healthcare professional. And by the end of that second intervention, she was building confidence in all of those areas. And she had the confidence to join groups, which meant she was able to carry on the progress after CBNRT had discharged. And on her final block of rehab from CBNRT, after consolidating all of the rehab and the previous goals that we'd worked on, she came back to us through a self-referral route with a brand new goal of returning to her caregiving roles, but this time in a different field, which is her experience in stroke recovery. Without CBNRT's interventions, she likely would be very isolated socially, probably not leaving the house, very dependent on her son for all activities. There would have probably been carer burnout, and there would have been reactive referrals for when the situation had broken down, and her mental health would definitely have been at significant risk. Now, the video I'm sharing today started as a goal within Elaine's stroke rehab journey last year, which was her final intervention with CBNRT. And originally it was in an article form, which will be published in the winter edition of the Stroke News magazine. Elaine dictated the article to me over 2 sessions. We then converted it into a presentation, practiced and recorded it. And this is the best bits from that recording to create the presentation. Finally, before I play it, I would like to add that CBNRT's final input with Elaine, after our final input, Elaine and her son have taken all the skills and advice from our sessions to create and write and deliver another different presentation to the University of Reading and their speech therapy students. But this time she presented it live, which is an enormous achievement and a progression from where we'd left her. But it also highlights what CBNRT strive to do for all of our patients, which is making our patients as independent as possible and to take ownership of their conditions beyond their contact time with health services, so that they can step away from being a patient and return to life and what that looks like for them. So I'll now stop talking and I will play Elaine's video. Can somebody give me a thumbs up just to make sure you can hear the sound?
My name is
Yes.
Elaine,
Thank you.
and I am just going to tell you my stroke story. It is life after stroke. I can do it, and so can you. I want to tell you about my journey, because if you don't know anything, you need to worry, but time will help you bring a little bit of you back. Sadly, I thought it was one of the worst possible things to happen to me. I had my stroke at home. Before the stroke, I had got into a little mess. Annie, my daughter, was going to get meds from the pharmacy, and I had stayed at home. Suddenly, I couldn't work out whether I was upstairs or downstairs. I couldn't work out where I was. I went to bed thinking I would be better after a sleep. When Annie came back home, she called the ambulance. I was taken to hospital and kept in an induced coma for 2 weeks.
Lovely.
When I woke up, my first impression were I've had a stroke. At 5 weeks, I was sent newly to Unity Hospital for a further 12 weeks of rehabilitation. I certainly didn't know anything about rehab. I have very little memory of this time. It was a blur. I was given everything: physio, OT, neuropsychology.
Well done.
Yeah.
And which one have you missed there?
Oh.
Me.
Speech therapy,
Excellent.
neuropsychology.
Lovely.
I couldn't read or write. I couldn't tell the time. I couldn't talk, not even hello. I couldn't walk or wash, rest myself. It lets me down thinking about that time. My thinking skills, especially my memory, was affected. When I saw James, my son, for the first time, I was shocked, as I remembered him as an 11 years old, not the 44-year-old man he is now. It took me some time to get used to him being a grown man. When I got home, I more or less said to the doctor, "What's the matter with me? Aunt had a stroke." I didn't want to believe it. He replied, "I do believe you have." About a year after my stroke, I thought I would never recover. I look at me now. I have received the best treatment yet. Three years on, and I don't believe how much I had recovered. I'm able to remember. I return to Wharton, saying how I feel, making drink and preparing food. Thy confidence has grown since my stroke, and now I feel full of confidence. I enjoy going out and talking. I go to the garden centres and meet my friends. I am simply able to walk around the shops for longer distances. I use my mobility scooter when the weather is dry. I has joined a book club where I had just started to read aloud every week. I've been told this is amazing, but I just feel normal. It took me a lot of hard work to get here, and sometimes I didn't want to do it, but my therapist encouraged me to carry on, and I'm so glad I did. So you see, I can do it, and so can you. My next goal is to get back to finishing my romance book that I was writing before my stroke. I will also continue to share my story to give other stroke hope.
Thank you very much. That's the end.
Helena, thanks ever so much for sharing that with us. It really has been incredibly powerful and quite an emotional video to watch. I'm sure there's going to be a number of questions. Aileen.
That was amazing. That really was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I've actually got goose pimples. It was, and as Mark said, it was very, very emotional. And what a difference you've made to that woman's life. It's just absolutely fabulous. So well done. I have got a specific question. I think I probably understand what you mean, but you said you said very specifically we're a goals-based service. I think I know what that means, but can you just explain to me just to make sure my assumption is correct?
Yes. So when people come to us, we've got 8 weeks to work with them, and we want to make sure that at the end of that 8 weeks they're going away. We want to focus on what is really important to them for that 8 weeks, and we want it to be achievable, or at least that we're able to leave them with additional independent exercises or tasks to go away and practice to achieve that goal. And because there is that self-referral route, we make it clear that they can that self-referral only really works if they've continued working and done all of that extra work after our input. And it would need to be either a progression of that goal or a brand new goal to come back to us. Or something has, yeah.
Do you get many people doing the self-referral route back?
I can
Mm,
probably help.
yes, I
It's,
don't know the numbers.
it's about 7% of people who do self-refer back. Some of our patients will go and have reviews with consultants and things and sort of come back via that route. But it's not probably as high as I thought it was going to be, which is reassuring because obviously the team are doing lots of work to promote independence, which is really good.
Yeah.
I think
you said 7%, did you?
about
7%,
7%, yes.
Right, okay. Okay, that's interesting. That is lower than I would have thought as well.
Sally,
A very inspiring story. Excuse my ignorance, but are there specific outcome measures for the service? And then I wondered if when you look at those outcome measures, if they're different depending on the demographic background of individuals. I suppose where I'm coming from is, do you notice a sort of difference between people whose first language might not be English, in that it might be more difficult for, depending on the language is spoken by the professionals?
Sorry, I've forgotten the first half. Oh, specific outcome measures.
Yeah, outcome measures.
So we use a range of outcome measures. We've got the FIMFAM, which is a multidisciplinary assessment tool which encompasses somebody holistically. So that's an outcome measure. And then within this, the SNAP, so the stroke guidance and their outcomes, there's lots of different measures of all different areas of rehab. I think they do show progress. I think actually if you were to look at the goals that are achieved, you'd see you would see bigger progress, but that's not a numbers outcome, it's just achieved or not.
I can probably help with some of the SNAP stuff, Helena, as well. So we feed into the largest stroke audit programme. So we refer to it as SNAP, but it's the Sentinel National Audit Programme for Stroke. So what we've done over the last year or so is we have, following national guidance and the increase in the community data set, because the SNAP stuff has always been quite acute focus, but it's increasing in the community, which is fantastic. So we have introduced and are continuing to introduce a cognitive screen, a mood screen, forgive me, I've forgotten the other one for a second. Visual screen, because the national guidance is showing that people coming out of hospital are having visual deficits that are missed. So we are doing lots of screens, but the idea of the SNAP data is it will give us a greater insight into any inequalities that are showing for patients with stroke. So I think it's probably going to take about 12 months until that data is good enough to use to define some of those inequalities, but yes, we're absolutely looking towards using it to define some of that information, which will be really helpful for our service.
No, that's
patients.
I was going to ask, if you notice any difference, say from Slough and Reading, perhaps from different areas, but yeah, I mean, it'd be very interesting to look at that data. Thank you.
And we we work quite hard with our interpreters to deliver therapy sessions through a translator. So and there's lots of like outside the session beforehand explaining what the session might look like and specific things that as a therapist we're looking out for that the interpreter can let us know about. So trying to make up for some of those differences.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Julia.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. Sort of conscious of time, so just keep it quite quick, but a couple of things. Obviously, incredible video. The other day, I was doing induction for 50 new members of staff, and I was explaining the mission of the organisation to maximise independence and quality of life. And someone said, "Oh, could you give me an example of that?" in future, I'll just point them to the video because that really is the essence of kind of, it was so powerful. Thank you. Very briefly, it might be one for you, Lisa, I don't know. Just very briefly, I'm interested in the fact that many people will start off perhaps in an acute hospital and then come to our service. And I'm just interested very briefly whether you think there might be some opportunities there in terms of partnership about how we can improve so that the journey is as smooth as possible. Any thoughts you've got there? Just very briefly rather than any detail.
Yeah,
Some thoughts.
absolutely. And our therapists do meet directly with the therapists from the Royal Berks because essentially they are the same patients. They're just at different stages of their rehabilitation. So we do have really close links with the team with the Royal Berks. We are getting an increasing number of referrals from different units as well. So we've got a bit of work to do with the JR and a little bit to do in East Berkshire as well. But yeah, scope to improve, but good links already in process.
Thank you. It's great.
Thank you. Teresa.
I mean, really powerful, and thank you so much to Elaine for allowing you to video her and share with us. It was just a question about carer support. Is that something that sits within your service, and how do you work with carers?
Yes, so one of our psychology trainees did a service improvement project, and we're currently interviewing carers at the moment to understand some more of their needs. So we do sessions with carers and we involve carers, but we're looking to expand that so we can have sort of some drop-in sessions and some increase the information on our website for people to access as well around support for patients' conditions and that kind of thing.
Lovely. Thanks, Lisa.
No problem.
Sonia.
Yeah, I guess extending again, what an amazing, powerful video. So thank you. I think it's always really so important for us as non-execs to see that the client patient stories. So thank you for that. My only question is around, it was sort of similar to Sally's, around BAME, so the ethnic minority groups. Do you get less referrals? Do they less acceptance of the referrals? Really around the health inequalities and interested, is there parity of take up of the service? Not for now, but one I think, be very fascinated to learn about.
Yeah, and I think for the ESD bit, so the bit where patients are coming straight from the stroke units, I think the referral rate is very good and there is good parity there. What we need to look into a little bit is our neuro rehab service. It can, we can get referrals from all sorts of sources. So I think that's the bit for us to deep dive into a little bit more to make sure that that's equitable for patients.
Thank you. And Rebecca.
Yeah, again, just echoing everybody else's comments. It was incredibly powerful and really great to see what the service is doing, how successful it is. I was just wondering, in terms of the speech therapy, does it also include sign language?
No, it could if that was indicated, but generally not within neuro rehab unless somebody was deaf and signing. Then I'd be finding an interpreter to come and support with the sessions. But not specific British Sign Language, but yes, we look at total communication. So it's not just, I don't just work on verbal communication and look at everything, that all the different ways that people communicate and get messages across.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Helena and Lisa, I think you can appreciate from people's reaction this morning in terms of the power of the presentation and for you coming along and sharing this, for which we're really grateful. Thank you. And please do pass on our thanks to the rest of the team, because as you stressed through your presentation, this is a multidisciplinary team delivering it, not just individuals. The other thing I would just ask, Helena, could you make sure that somebody goes back to Elaine to say thank you and just to explain that her video was shown at the board and the power that it had with us, because I think it's really important that she appreciates just what an impact she's had. And that's another stage that she can tick off, hopefully, on her journey.
Absolutely. I will definitely take that back to her.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, welcome, Mike. Good to see you again. It's that time of year for us to receive your report, which we've hopefully all read and digested. Do you want to take us through some of the highlights and issues you were identifying?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Mark, and good morning, everyone. What a powerful start to the morning. very hard act to follow. You'll see that there's a general rise in the number of cases that sort of come to Freedom to Speak Up over various quarters. I suppose worth highlighting that is in general because the central guidance has changed slightly, so that people coming to me looking for advice, that is now to be counted as data, as a case raised, rather than just where people come to me and issues are raised to senior management. So that probably accounts for that. On occasions, there will be blips in that, excuse me, there might be a collective concern raised, several members of staff coming to me around a concern they might have within their service, but certainly for the last couple of quarters, that hasn't been the case. The data is all there as to which divisions, which professional groups, etc., are raising concerns, and the elements of patient safety or bullying or inappropriate behaviours. Just under 60% of sort of the conversations I have or the cases that are raised via Freedom to Speak Up involve poor behaviours within teams, which has sort of been pretty consistent. Some of that is elements of bullying, but other inappropriate behaviours as well. And so, as I said, yeah, around 60% of those cases. We have around 35 champions within the trust helping to raise awareness, Freedom to Speak Up, and they pretty much match the geographical spread of the organisation, the services that are within the organisation, and who they are. So the diversity of the champions pretty much matches diversity of the organisation. We do have gaps, and so I think going forward, be looking at a more targeted approach to see if champions wanted to support with raising awareness. So, for example, Tolu will be aware that we have no representation within the medics within the organisation, and that's something that I've been in conversation with him about, and there may be other sort of services where it might be useful to have somebody there to help raise awareness, where there may be sort of culture may not be as good there as it might be in other parts of the organisation. In general, feedback from those that come to me is very positive. I think there's a bit of learning there around managing expectations. So what is within my remit and what isn't. So the fact that I'm effectively a communication channel, I don't get involved in investigation work, so can't influence outcomes or anything like that. So I think that there's a bit of work to be done there. But also around quality of feedback that the organisation gives to those that raise concerns. I think there's something that we should be doing there to get for people to get better feedback that helps minimise any risk of detriment. It helps to give them closure. I understand that it can be difficult when it's around behaviours within teams, and if there's a formal HR process and issues around confidentiality, etc. But if there is something that we can do more to ensure that people get better feedback, not just being thanked for raising a concern, for alerting us that something is wrong in the organisation, but for them to have better feedback, then I would certainly ask the board for their support in that. And as I say, it links to detriment. We don't want there to be any detriment. People should be thanked for raising a concern and not suffer from it. That again can be difficult when it's around behaviours and in small teams and people being spotlit. There aren't many people within a team or service, and as I said, most of it is around behaviours. And then I suppose lastly, stuff around the staff experience. So a lot of the concerns are around bullying, harassment, microaggressions, etc. It's difficult for people to raise these types of concerns, and I think maybe the outcomes aren't what people would want. Difficult to call out a bully and identify bullying type behaviour, but what does the organisation do with those that potentially display that type of behaviour? How can we improve their behaviours? So I suppose though the three things, Mark, that I would want or ask the board to support generally around sort of improving the cultures. We have a good culture, but there's always room for targeted improvement. And that really is sort of what I wanted to raise to the board today, but very happy to answer any questions or take comments.
No, thank you for that, Mike. Particularly as it's anti-bullying week this week that we're in, it's an opportune moment for us just to take a few moments to reflect on that. Any questions for Mike in terms of either the report or what has just been said? Sally?
Mike,
Sorry.
thank you for your report, Mike. And it's good to hear you've got a much more diverse group of Speak Up Guardians. You sort of mentioned what was raised in my mind as I read your report, in that people are saying, staff are saying they don't get appropriate feedback. And what it sort of I questioned in my mind was do we have a shared understanding of what appropriate feedback is?
I think it's quite subjective. It's people's expectations of what they would like to happen, and quite often that isn't feasible. We try and change behaviours rather than people leave the organisation or asked to leave. It is difficult. I think there's a review on casework that's being conducted at the moment or about to start, I think, and that is part of it, sort of looking at what can we actually give as good, meaningful feedback that gives people closure, that doesn't impact on any confidentiality issues. So very much work in progress, I think.
Thank you. And perhaps some sort of information beforehand which sets people's expectations around what's appropriate, perhaps. I don't know.
So I'm preparing like a Q&A type paper at the moment, which will sort of outline bit more detail my role, how that differs from HR, etc., and expectations, and so that I think that will help.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sally.
Sonia.
Thanks, Mark. I like that you link to our culture and how important what you do sets the foundation, is pivotal. In the deck, as you said, your role is communications. It highlights the lunch and learns and the webinars and the various things. Do you know how many people across all of those activities you've done, we have reached in or touched in some way, shape or form? Because I think it's that understanding how many of our staff have heard or been exposed to stories to get them to truly trust there is a process and it is taken seriously and earnestly, even if, as Rebecca could jump in, we don't share the outcomes because legally and personally we shouldn't be. But I'm very fascinated. How many touch point opportunities are there for all staff to know that we do take this very seriously? Does that make sense?
So yeah, so I'm present at all staff inductions, so corporate induction, resident doctors, students, etc. So they will get awareness of Freedom Speak Up and the process, and some comments around the desired culture and behaviours, etc. At that, I get invited to visit teams to raise awareness around Freedom Speak Up, linking it into work around psychological safety. There's a little toolkit I use where we can assess psychological safety in a team and use a QI approach to try and improve that. There are the webinars, as you said, so there's one later on this week specifically around bullying, but I do several of those a year. We have our managers support network, so if there's information or guidance around culture that's specific for our managers, I'm very much involved in that, and I help deliver some of the leadership offer. So impact for leaders. I talk about sort of the courageous conversations, civility at work, and sort of the whole culture piece. So I get out and about as much as I can. There's always more that I can do. I link in with the staff networks to ensure that as many people as possible have an understanding as to what I do, Freedom Speak Up as a process, and culture in general.
That's great. Now, I'd be just fascinated of the 5,000 plus staff. How many you might touch a year? It'd be just fascinating for me to know that if you look at it. But not now. I'll let you look into that and then really truly understand that impact or how many touch points people have access to and how much take up there is. Would be just clearly on the FIP committee. That's I love my numbers, Mike. But fantastic that you do have all those conversations.
Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, Mike, for that. It's a timely reminder in terms of the role that we can play as well as NEDs when we do visits to services and get out and meet with staff. Please stay with us whilst Debbie now takes us through the Freedom Speak Up improvement plan, because it'd be good to hear views on that. Debbie.
Yeah, so Mike helps with this. So Mark, he is fully versed in it. So for those that are newer to the board, it's good practice that every couple of years we actually use the NHSE tool around freedom to speak up and looking at best practice and where we are. We are going to be revisiting it. Will come to the January in committee board for a conversation and then in public in March. And some of the things that Mike has talked about today are certainly things that we can make sure we build into our improvement plan for over the next couple of years. This one is nearing its end, so most of the things that we signed up to doing in the last couple of years we have done. The two areas that are outstanding are the review of casework, which Mike has alluded to, and that was put back because there was an internal audit around casework, and so the improvement work will build on the findings of that. And the other thing is around encouraging staff to speak around positive stories. That is proving more challenging than we had hoped, because people generally satisfied but then want to forget about it and move on, as opposed to sharing that experience. So those two things will carry on into the next improvement plan, and things that we need to carry on trying to give some thought and consideration to, and that's all I wanted to say on this, really. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Debbie. Any questions for Debbie in terms of the improvement plan and that report? Just a very minor one, Debbie, on those positive stories, which really always are quite powerful, as we've heard in the past. The offer of all of that anonymity being provided and support, etc., still doesn't encourage people to step forward.
No, I think we've got to look at it. Mike and I were talking about this the other day about how we, because yes, we absolutely would. It doesn't have to be someone saying I've done this. We would it's absolutely anonymous, and it's a conversation Mike has with people at the end of every process. And to say, at the moment, I just think we need to think about a different tack for it, because at the moment people are, no, thank you. My individual problem solved. I'm really happy. Thank you. As opposed to, it would be really helpful to share so that we can see, so that others can see that it is worth going through that process. I mean, we know from our staff survey, we have a very high percentage of staff that say they would feel happy to go to the Freedom Speak Up Guardian, but all the time you're getting new staff into the organisation, and having some of those stories would be really powerful. So we just need to give some thought to a switch of tactic on this one, I think.
Thank you. And thank you both Debbie and Mike for all the work that you do. And just again, for the benefit of some of the new members of the board, Mike leads this activity in a leadership sense across beyond our trust with other trusts and in the South East region, and is seen as a leading light in terms of activity in the Freedom to Speak Up arena. So thank you for that, because you are an ambassador not just for the subject but also for Berkshire Healthcare as well, which is greatly appreciated that you take on that additional responsibility. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.
Moving on, patient experience. Debbie, back to you, your quarterly report.
Thanks. I'm going to aim that we do this in questions before 11 o'clock for you, Mark, so that we don't cut off mid-sentence. It's the usual report everybody will be familiar with. A couple of points I wanted to pull out. We had seen a drop in patient feedback. The I Want Great Care have moved to a new platform, and what became obvious when we were looking at the data and reviewing it mid-October for September was that for some reason there'd been a I'm not very IT, so I probably won't say this as it's supposed to, so sorry for the IT people in the room, but basically the link that sends the SMS to everybody stopped working. So for September and for most of October, we haven't had SMS feedback. That has been rectified, and we have retrospectively sent those SMSs out, but whether people feel that they want to talk about their experience a few weeks on as opposed to doing it instantly. So that's why we've seen a little bit of a drop, but that it looks like it's been rectified and all should be okay from November. I've talked previously about us not receiving much feedback from young people who are using our IM service and not wanting to fill out stuff electronically. Staff have made a really concerted effort at every immunisation session to have a table, pens, paper, encouraging. As a result, we've had a huge amount of feedback, around 2,000 responses in relation to the IM service. What that has interestingly done is lowered the children, families and all age overall satisfaction result, because the young people filling out the forms have only about an 80% positive satisfaction, which is lower than pretty much anywhere else. And the reason is because they don't like having immunisations and they would rather we provided biscuits for them. So that is the theme of the feedback. But I did want to just pull that out because it does skew our figures a little bit, because that's quite a sizable chunk about our feedback for certainly September. We've seen more MP complaints again, which concerns raised again, which is not a surprise. They are back to pre-election levels. We had seen quite a drop off last year with virtually all of the MPs being new and obviously getting to grips with the process. Julian had written to them at the time, so they knew how to raise a concern if they had one, but it's just taken a while for us to start seeing those coming through again. And overall this year so far, we are seeing less formal complaints and more complaints resolved at an informal local level, which is good because we want people to be having their concern answered in the moment, here and now, resolved, and not needing to escalate it to a formal complaint, which is brilliant. I think that does skew our upheld complaints. So you'll see in the report that we have seen more of our complaints are upheld and partially upheld. And I do wonder, and we'll see how it transcribes over the next couple of quarters, but if that's because we're getting less complaints and those that are complaining for a very valid reason. So they were the things I wanted to pull out, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Debbie, I'm so grateful that you mentioned the I Want Great Care and that there was a systems glitch. I recently, a couple of weeks ago, did a visit to Wokingham Hospital with Dan, your deputy, and in the podiatry service, where we were visiting in the morning, I asked a question of, I want great care, what support do you give? And they were saying that for some reason they weren't receiving feedback, and it was difficult to encourage the staff to provide or get input to the questionnaire if they weren't going to get it. And I know Dan said that he would come back and look into it as well. So I'm grateful. That's back up and running already, or is it due to come back on stream?
No, it's back up and running. We had a month or so where they were swapping from one platform to a new platform, and therefore people weren't they were still able to get the feedback, but they weren't able to access it in the easy way through Tableau, which is the usual way of doing it. But no, it's all back up and running. Liz, as our patient experience lead, has regular webinars and drop-ins for staff to answer any queries, and posts on that channel, so everybody is aware that we've transitioned to the new platform. It's up and running, and aware of the challenges that we had around SMS. It's now resolved.
Excellent, that's good to hear. Any questions or points for Debbie? No? In which case, as we are getting very close to 11 o'clock, rather than going to the 6-month safe staffing report, do people want to just take a break for a couple of minutes, and we'll take the silence at 11 o'clock and reconvene at 2 minutes past? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, Debbie, would you like to take us through the Safe Staffing Report?
Thank you, Mark. So again, for those less familiar with the report, this 6-monthly report is written to reflect the requirements of the NHSE Developing Workforce Safeguards document of 2018. In summary, the staffing over the last 6 months across the wards has been assessed as being safe. We've had no significant incidents as a result of staffing that have been identified. We're not expecting any significant changes over the coming period that will alter that. The main things over the last 6 months are on our mental health wards, where we have moved to 18 patients from the 22 that we had on our acute wards, and we now have 2 single sex and 2 mixed sex wards rather than 4 mixed sex wards. I have looked on Model Hospital, which enables us to benchmark with our peers in terms of care hours per patient day. That basically just means the number of staff that we have divided by the number of patients. That gives you a nominal figure for how many hours are available in front of each patient. Now, obviously, some have more and some have less depending on need, but that's what it's about. And it does enable you to have a bit of a benchmark. We continue to show slightly lower for registered staffing, but actually we show slightly more when we look at our total staffing, including healthcare assistants and AHPs. So I am confident that I feel that we are safely staffed. I think we've got a much improving picture on our mental health wards. I have put a little table in the highlight report just to reflect what it looked like a year ago and what it looks like now in terms of our ability to recruit and therefore our temporary staff in use and our shifts with less than 2 registered staff, and all those metrics are going in the right direction. And actually, if we looked back to 2023, the figures at the baseline were kind of double that. So we have seen significant improvement over the last 2 years. I've also added into the no, I haven't. Ignore that. That was patient experience. I won't say what I was going to say there. And I think that is the main things that I wanted to pull out for this report, and I'm happy to take any questions. There is a safer staffing tool for community nursing now. It's being developed by NHSE. I've talked about it here before. It was paused, it was refined, it's back out for use again. We've used it once to data collect. The advice is you should use it at least twice before you use it to set any parameters or any changes in any staffing. So we will be redoing that again in the new calendar year, and then that will come into the next 6-monthly report. The other thing, just to say from a planning perspective, is that all of our services with clinical staff are looking at the moment with a bit of a spreadsheet on some quality metrics, their staffing, their vacancy, and their capacity and demand and capacity, to ensure as we go into the planning round that staffing is considered alongside all the other metrics that we need to be considering. So that will come into FIP at some point when that's collated as part of the planning.
Thanks, Debbie. And I think it should be noted and credit given to both yourself in terms of nursing leadership, but also Jane from people leadership. The improvement that we've seen over the past few years is really tangible, and that doesn't come about just simply by good luck or the market or other factors. It is the amount of time and effort that you've put into the wide range of initiatives. So thank you from the board in terms of now seeing the fruit of your labours for that. Any other comments or points to Debbie? No? In which case, thanks ever so much for that report. Polu, getting basics right for resident doctors.
So this paper has been brought to board, firstly at the request of NHS England, but also because it will now form part of the indicators that will be used for the NHS oversight framework, hence the relevance. The key issues here are the fact that it's about actions we are obliged to take to improve the working lives of resident doctors. Things like ensuring they have access to rest areas, on-call parking spaces, that we give them a work schedule with adequate time prior to their starting so they know exactly where they're going to be and can make arrangements accordingly, and that we avoid payroll errors, amongst other things. What we have in place, we have 2 named leads. I am one, and we've got one of the resident doctors also acting as a peer lead. And we have also set up a working group that actually has gone through the range of issues that have been raised to ensure that we have appropriate plans in place addressing those issues. We are on track to meet, to address all of those issues within the time frame we have been set. And we also expect that we will continue to keep an eye on the progress with this and reporting to board periodically. And on that basis, I will take any questions.
Hello, just as a general point on this, when I read your report, a lot of the recommendations and things that we were being asked to comply with appeared to be just almost fairly elementary, basic good practice. Were there any things contained in there that we weren't doing that came as a surprise to you in terms of, no, this is something that we're going to have to introduce?
I think for us, there were 2 main aspects. One is around payroll errors. What we discovered is that we were not fully cited. We only keep records when we have overpaid. We don't keep records when we have underpaid. And we picked up a number of underpayments for some of our resident doctors, which they've been trying to resolve, which had caused a bit of discomfort. So we have looked into that and have addressed those. The other bit is the fact that we don't have a centralized system for annual leave approvals. So, for example, we don't have annual leave is approved in various pockets by the relevant managers, but there is no centralized way of collecting it. So we know how many doctors are off on annual leave at any one time. So potentially we could be in a position where almost every resident doctor could have been given leave all at the same time. We have nobody available. That is theoretically possible. So we are needing to bring in processes to address those. And part of that will require some degree of automation. And of course, we'll have a cost implication, which is probably the only other bit to mention, that there is a slight cost implication to that.
Thank you. Sonia.
Yeah, Tolu, I think mine is sort of echoing Mark's questions. I'm intrigued. Firstly, I'm not sure how many medical doctors we have, so that's a simple question. But how does, on all of this, how do they compare in versus all staff, like our staff survey results? You know, that's what sort of leaps out at me. And is there, therefore, those issues of underpayment happening elsewhere? So it could be a Jane question as well, but has this highlighted issues that could exist elsewhere, and do we look at that across the board? And I see Jane's got a hand up, so she may be jumping in to help you, Tolu.
I think part of the issue, though, is because we have doctors who rotate through different organizations, and it's that change that creates some of the issues. So whilst it is not impossible, we might have it amongst our other workforce, I suspect it's much less of an issue as opposed to this. Some of the issues you'll also find, I mean, these issues that are raised do exist and happens a lot more in a lot of our acute trust organizations. So they look like very basic stuff, but it does really happen. We don't have much of an issue. Part of that is because we have addressed a number of the issues very early on. And we tend to be more proactive in some of those responses.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Tolu. You'd mentioned about the theoretical challenges that might be presented if, all holidays approved. But I was just wondering, in practice, is that causing an issue? Are you aware of anything that's occurred as a result of the current holiday booking system?
Currently, we know we do have bottlenecks at key periods during the summer and around key holidays like Christmas. We know we do have some bottlenecks, and we're trying to be a bit more proactive in terms of ensuring that there is some clear governance process around approval of leave. It's just having a way of having some oversight over it that we just need to get to grips with.
And in terms of sort of adjusting the system and the oversight, is there a time scale that's being worked towards to achieve that?
So we're looking at tightening we have paper processes at the moment. So we're looking at tightening that in terms of clear accountability. So once it's approved by the line manager, we make sure that the medical lead also has oversight. So that's the interim arrangements we're putting in place. The longer term arrangements is really to have something that is electronic so that there is clear oversight across the board, including within medical staffing, about who's around and who's on leave.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tolu.
Thank you. Jane.
Just to come back on the staff survey results, we do see that our medical staff do have lower satisfaction rates than other staff, but that is actually mimicked across the NHS. And currently there's a lot of discontent in the medical profession, so it's not unique to us.
Okay. Thank you, Tolu, and please do keep us advised in terms of how that progresses in the coming months with those changes that you are talking about. Julian, executive report.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to take it as read rather than just to sort of formally in public acknowledge Teresa's appointment. A pleasure to have us with us after an interim period as Chief Operating Officer, so welcome. The rest, I think, is self-explanatory. It's easy to understand, so it's more a case of, are there any questions or implications people want to follow up on, Mark?
Okay. Just one item from myself, Julian. It may be one for Tolu or Debbie. On Jess's rule, I can understand achieving a definitive diagnosis in a physical setting, but in a mental health setting, does Jess's rule apply equally to that as well? Or have I misunderstood that?
So I would say that, and that people might have a view on this, I would say Jess's rule applies, but more likely to our GP practice West Core that we also run. And that's where we have had occasions in the past where actually a patient has presented multiple times and we haven't been as proactive in addressing the issue in terms of a second opinion type arrangement. I would see Jess's rule as almost a variation of our Matters rule arrangement, which does apply to us and which we are proactively work on and have rolled out.
Thank you for that. Sally, welcome back. Your question.
Thank you. I had a question actually for Debbie from this report, and it was around the district nursing and the national picture, and that it says at the end district nurses are the bedrock and around addressing the recruitment. I wondered, Debbie, I think I saw in the Safer Staffing report that actually the numbers of people that we've recruited for district nursing in September has gone down. And I wondered whether you had any comments to make around whether we're providing adequate career pathways, both for the Band 5 nurses wanting to come into district nursing and then for subsequent sort of opportunities. Because when I visited the district nursing services, they've often said that either they were thinking of leaving because of less opportunities. I don't know if you've got any comments around that. You're on mute.
On mute.
That's not helpful. Might be in the monthly report rather than this quarterly one, Sally, because we don't report in this one on community nursing. We take a lot of newly registered staff into this service, and they do have clinical pathways up to Band 8. We are currently looking at, so we've got a really clear consultant nurse structure in mental health, and it is more in its infancy, I would say, in our community services, but they have just or are in the processes of appointing a consultant nurse for community nursing, and we also have consultant nurses in our urgent and community response, and we also have advanced nurse practitioners in the community. So there are clinical pathways, but the challenge with all clinical pathways is for every 10, 15, 20 band 5s, there's one more senior clinical, so which is always a challenge, but they are there, and we are looking and working on those actually across children's and our community physical health services and CAMS at the moment in terms of consultant nurse, but all of them have advanced nurse practice, and there's quite a few AMPs in the community services actually, and nurse prescribers.
And the band 5s, Debbie, do you think we were able to sort of give student nurses adequate experience, which makes it attractive, and then once they're appointed into the band 5s, there's opportunity, that they feel supported and there's a role for them?
So you might have seen in the safe staffing paper, we've actually just won the quality mark for our preceptorship for nursing and AHP, which is testament to the preceptorship that happens for newly registered staff. The vast majority of the staff recruited into community nursing are newly registered staff. Now that comes with its own challenges, because of course they start brand new and need a lot of support. But when I go out and about with community nurses, I was out with one a couple of weeks ago actually who had been a student with us and then had progressed and taken on a role. We have a good conversion from students to community.
Well, that's really helpful, and it'd be interesting to see those numbers, over a period of time, given the shift into community. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Julian.
Yeah, just building on that, the other thing that comes out from the national work is it is partly what Sally was talking about, but partly about what opportunities are there in terms of the work that has been done. And I think one of the issues is that district nurses have chosen sometimes other pathways like care home in reach because of the more contained nature of the work, as opposed to what is more akin to being a lot of the sort of pressures in primary care are replicated in district nursing. And I think there's an opportunity with the work that we're doing in terms of neighbourhood redesign, which is kind of a big part of the 10-year plan, about how we interface with primary care, how we interface with practice nurses, and that whole out of hospital bit, which, the punchline to that paragraph, isn't it, is the district nurses are the bedrock of which everything else is kind of built on. And it is just that the district nurses have been around a long time, and then we've built on other services, intermediate care services, care home in reach services, urgent community response services. And there's an opportunity, I think, as part of that, it's an ugly phrase, the left shift, I think, there's getting the news, but the strengthening of the community, to look at the totality of resources are out there, not only to see how they can function, but also we have to think about the clinical sustainability of that totality of services. So there might be an opportunity also, Mark, to think in the future, are there some tweaks to the kind of role or changes to the role that would make it more rewarding? Maybe taking out some of the hassle of the interface issues between those different teams, and maybe secondments in and out more easily to give people some change of experience. So I do think we need to get into that, as well as the work that Debbie's described as well.
That's very valid points. Debbie, did you want to come back on?
Yeah, sorry, no, not on that point. No, it's just about Jessie's rule. So it is focused on physical health and misdiagnosis or not diagnosing on physical health, which is where we will start our focus. it is a really good point about mental health, and I think it becomes much more complicated when you're talking about missing diagnosis in mental health. But it's certainly something that we should be considering in the round when we are looking at the application of this for us, the same as we have with many other initiatives looked at how it translates into mental health, even though it doesn't start being particularly focused on mental health. So it's definitely something that we would want to have a look and see if it's applicable, and if so, what that would mean.
Thank you for that clarification. Helps. Thank you for your report, Julian. Moving on to the health and wellbeing update. Welcome Jane and Steph Mokes, who I hope are both here. I can see Jane on my screen.
I'm here as well.
Jane, do you want to? Oh, great. Do you want to take us through the report, Jane?
Well, Steph is the author of the report, and she's going to talk you through the report today, if that's okay. I'm here in case there are any wider questions.
Thank you.
Hi all. Yeah, thank you. First of all, apologies. A draft of the of our report went into the papers, but it is mostly correct. It's just ignore the front page because that reviews our May ones. I'll take most of it as read. Just want to pull out a couple of key highlights for the last 6 months. We ran our first physical health challenge for the first time in quite a while. So we did September, which was a step challenge, and we got an incredible engagement. Actually, over 900 staff took part. Walked around the world 4 times, I think it was, and the feedback was fantastic. We got some really good feedback from staff, and we in fact had somebody who had just gone through a really difficult personal situation, and they said having that there as a reason to get out every day really supported them. So that was really brilliant to see, and we'll be looking at how we can continue these sort of support, these challenges going forward, because it seemed to go down really well. It was also great that we were able to link with the charity, and that was a bit of a test. So it only raised £1,000 this time, but we reckon we can increase that next time by promoting it a bit more. Wellbeing Matters continues to grow, particularly the request for individual support. That was 20% up, but also our team support remains really steady. We're really glad to have our new system in place now, which is increasing the confidentiality, particularly for sort of talking therapy staff, where previously we were using the same system as them, and that would cause some concerns. So it's great to now have that in place, and it's also going to improve our reporting around sort of health inequalities, linking into our anti-racism work, all of that, that side of things. And we're also really excited to be trialling compassionate mind training for staff as well. So we've got one group that is currently just started, which was like an open access for anyone to sign up to, and then we've got a group that's going to be running with a team shortly. So we're sort of trialing that and seeing how that goes for supporting our staff as well. Couple of new bits in here from before. So financial support I've tried to bring out a little bit more because I feel like this is becoming more constant for us. So we've supported 15 staff in the last 6 months with financial support. That might just be signposting. We've supported 11 staff with food bank vouchers. Some of those needed multiple food bank vouchers. And then you can also see the use of salary finance is quite steady as well. And this isn't something that we really push. It's there for staff when they need it. But you can see the amount of advances. There's 122 people actively using advances regularly, which is where they can draw forward their salary if they need to. So yeah, we're just sort of picking up on that trend, and we're going to be keeping more of an eye on it and how we're supporting those staff. And then the Wellbeing at Work sessions as well are going fantastically well. We launched those in just the beginning of March. They came out of the Wellbeing Review last year. We've had over 2,500 attendees across those, and again getting some really good feedback on those, and they cover a real variety of topics. So yeah, fantastic to see those things going on. Just on the upcoming, unfortunately, we were unsuccessful for the NHS Charities Together Workforce Wellbeing Grant this time. But the second application round is open now. So we're doing some work with Carla in our EDI team and Joe in the charity to review what applications were successful, what were our sort of runner-up options and ideas from our engaging with staff, and what we can do in that space. The great thing is, though, that we have put in a separate bid to the Berkshire Healthcare Charity, which actually I didn't include in this report, but we've put that in to run Citizens Advice Bureau sessions at Prospect Park and Upton on a trial, and we've just found out that we've got the funding for that from the Berkshire Healthcare Charity, so we'll be able to get that trial up and running soon, again working with the EDI team on that. And then lastly, just wanted to mention, I've put it in there in a couple of places, but our capacity in the team has been reduced slightly over the last 6 months. And we're looking at that potentially going forward as well in the ergonomic space. So yeah, just the amount of work we're doing in this space is slightly reducing because we're having to work within that capacity. But there was also a request after talking to Mark on our regular catch up about I know that you all do your board to ward walks, and it'd be great if you could sort of promote the health and wellbeing support through that, or ask some questions, and we can maybe pull together like a one sheet, because there is a lot of support there. So I don't expect you to remember it all, but you know, if I could get some details out to you or something, that would be, because that's some of the stuff we're having to pull back on. So if we can replace it in another way, that would be amazing. So I think those are my highlights. If there's any questions.
Thanks ever so much, Steph, and thank you and the team for what you've been undertaking. It always tires me out when I read through your report that you cover so much ground, and it amazes me just how many initiatives and how broad a reach you've got there, which thanks sincerely for all that work. Alex.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much, Steph. Really good overview. I just wanted to pick out Wellbeing Matters because I think that is quite a unique offer in the current context. And let's link back to Julian's exec report around mental health issues and well-being, and the importance of a psychologically informed Wellbeing Matters service that we have, and to see the outcomes, because I think this is also about value for money and being careful around where we spend our resources on well-being in amongst a wide-ranging impact. But the outcomes reported by staff are very positive and significant in terms of the impact. And I think we are always, and through the wellbeing review, just checking for the pounds we're spending and the resources we're using, are we getting the impact we need to be connected for wellbeing for staff? And I think for Wellbeing Matters, we can see that in the report. And I think the compassionate mind training, Steph, really interesting to see where that goes actually as a component for mitigating pressure, helping adaptability, resilience, and so on. So I'd be really keen to see how that develops. Thank you.
Good point. Sonia.
Yeah, Mark, I just wanted to acknowledge as well, I thought it was such a fantastically written report, as well as the breadth that Mark mentioned really astounded me. Certainly when Sally and I were on walks, I was asking about the EAP program, but to read the broader diversity of offers is truly exceptional. And therefore, I did want to also acknowledge the results that you haven't verbally stated, but that you've got the 74% in the national survey, that we're the third best in the national staff survey results. To Alex's point, you're clearly getting the impact. So while I sense potential frustration that the team's smaller, clearly what you're doing has us in that top quartile. So I hope you really feel proud and that the team feel proud of the results, that the impact that you are able to have, even if you potentially can't get as much depth in what you're doing, it's clearly working. So I wanted to acknowledge that, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Just two very quick minor points from me. First of all, I know you touched on it, Steph, the September to me was a really good collaboration between Joe in the charitable side and working with your own team. And I know it's the first initiative, but to see more of those in the future, I think it really shows the power of one and one adding up to more than just simply two. The other thing that I would say is the well-being seminars that you refer to. I sat in on one recently. I know Alex joined us. It was the smoking cessation program, and I learned a huge amount in that in terms of the quality and professionalism of the team that were presenting it. It wasn't almost a GCSE standard. This was really highly professional, really insightful in terms of the information and myth busting as well. And I would encourage other NEDs that if you get the opportunity, I know there's one this afternoon at 3:30 on worrying and rumination, not remuneration, rumination, which again fascinates me. And just before the remuneration committee later on at 4 o'clock with the governors, I'll be attending that just to learn more from that. So as I've said before, thanks ever so much to you and the team. You're producing a huge amount from a very small dedicated team, for which we as an organisation are very grateful. It helps support the culture as it is, and it's the staff survey that feeds that back consistently to us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Debbie, reducing violence and aggression update.
I will pull out a couple of bits, and I will leave Ash to see if there's anything else he wanted to pull out of the report, if that's okay. So this builds on previous reports, so it's not to the extent of everything we're doing, it's what we've done since you saw the report last. The majority of assaults, both physical and non-physical, continue to be experienced by our staff working within mental health. And given that these are a 6-month point in terms of numbers, if we carry on with the same number in this current 6 months to the end of March, we will have seen more physical and non-physical assaults of our staff this year than we did last year, which mirrors, I know there's an article I think in the Telegraph about this recently. The CPS have received in this last 6 months updated guidance around prosecutions, and really reinforcing the need for that in terms of emergency workers, which I think is really helpful and seen. And in actual fact, we have in the last couple of weeks had a successful prosecution of someone who had assaulted our staff more than 20 times, which is positive to see, and we need to get that message out to our staff so they do realise that it is worth going through what is actually quite a difficult process for our staff in terms of reaching a prosecution from the public or patients. We have had some revised sexual safety assurance framework, which goes alongside the Sexual Safety Charter, which we signed in 2023. We've had a look at that. Most of what is in there we were already doing. There's a couple of small elements, including reviewing of our chaperone policy and making sure the board are cited on any staff allegations. And they were the bits that I wanted to pull out. Ash, is there anything else from your perspective?
No, I think just to draw more on the point you made, Debbie, that the staff survey results, the RES indicator shows abuse from public has gone up. So this is a particular area of focus for us. We've just recently had an abuse survey where around 400 staff completed. We've done some engagement with our trust leaders, our race equality network, and some focus groups are happening across the system, as well as a rapid improvement event at Prospect Park. So hopefully with some of those insights and data, that will give us more opportunity to take further action. But some of the early themes that are coming out from staff are around more access to training and the right level of training. And that's probably solved in the report you notice around the training needs analysis that we've done. Resources and equipment, awareness of resources and tools. So there's an ask around actually lone working devices. Can we look at how they're delivered these days in terms of is there better technology with that? Also sanctions as well, and how we deal with perpetrators, which Debbie's mentioned. That's an ask from staff as well, and better communication of incident outcomes, when actually that's something we've just implemented in terms of closing that feedback loop back to staff of what's been, how that incident's been dealt with. So our VPR, our violence prevention working group, continuously has a focus on this violence and abuse work. So yeah, that's the main point really I wanted to labour.
Thank you, Ash. Alex.
Yeah, just to shed a bit of light on the racism and racist discrimination that's been widely reported. Unions are concerned, staff are concerned. Yesterday we had a very well attended community forum, our anti-racism in healthcare community forum, with staff, representatives of the community members and partners, and a real highlight to the fear and concern out there in the community about the current context, racism, the politics, the division. And I think we've seen the trend really spike, haven't we, in terms of discrimination and abuse. And the Anti-Racism Task Force are going to pick this issue up, because I think we've got a lot of guidance that's been developed. It's about understanding what impact and action we're taking on when incidents happen. So we talk, it's great to see the prosecution, but are we tracking how many incidents we're reporting to the police, getting onto the kind of consequence and impact end of this spectrum around sanctions and consequence for perpetrators? I think that is an area that our community and staff really are hoping to get support with. So just to let the board know, we're picking that up in the Anti-Racism Task Force as a specific kind of highlight through the VPR agenda.
That's good to hear, Alex. Thank you. Sally.
I was going to what I was going to say was slightly overlap with Alex, in as much as I do think it would be important for the board in future papers to have perhaps some numbers in terms of how many incidents we've reported to the police, and then how many have been successfully prosecuted, in terms of our commitment to trying to tackle this. And the second thing I wanted to ask Ash, and this isn't to sort of, for want of a better word, victim blame, but I've seen elsewhere a correlation between perhaps, and it's a training issue, perhaps more inexperienced staff and being on the receiving end of physical assault. So do we see any correlation with around that, and whether there's an indication that there might be training needs in some areas?
Yeah, absolutely, Sally. There's a correlation between I think it's being under 30, ethnically diverse, and particularly in our mental health service area. So there's some themes and trends that we're aware of, and some of that training ask is being addressed through our training needs analysis. So that is around. I see Sonia's point there as well. So the training point is around, for example, I'll give a very brief example. For example, we had perhaps community nursing not having any skills or training in breakaway, for example, but community CMHT staff would, and both teams would be going into the same home with one having the skills and one not. So that's what we're kind of addressing, if that makes sense, because the risk is the same regardless of the service.
No, thanks very much.
Sonia.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. And I just want to highlight, look, it's alarming to see the numbers go up, and I think it's what no one wants to see. So Ash, your hypothesis as to why, and I find it perplexing, because I know you've got so many initiatives and actions in place to address it, and we're still going the wrong way in direction. So I really look forward to those insights, and a deep dive on this would be certainly welcome from my side.
Debbie.
Some of the other work that we've been doing, and we need to really carry on doing, and I think the board can help with as well when you're out and about on your Gemba visits, is clinical staff continue to be really reticent to actually escalate to the police. And I've had some really quite in-depth conversations where staff know that it's the right thing to do. They know they would be supported to do it, but they hang on to the fact, particularly in mental health, that this can't possibly be the person's underlying behaviours. It must be to do with their illness, which of course is not always the case. But staff are very, very reluctant to report to the police because of that. So a step back from how many times do we report this to the police and what are the outcomes, is that helping staff to understand that actually they need to be reported. It's illegal, it's not acceptable, and it needs to be reported to the police. But staff, clinical staff in particular, find that really difficult to square in their heads. So we do need to do that piece of work as well and continue with that piece of work.
Teresa.
Yeah, and I suppose linked with that, Debbie, is what is the sanction? So there's a small percentage, isn't there, that end up in a prosecution, but actually it's the so what question. So you report a patient that's been aggressive, violent during an admission. Next admission, they're likely to still come back to Prospect Park, and I think that is a challenge for us. And again, in our community nursing, that patient needs an intervention. Are we going to be in a position where we say, actually, as an organisation, we're not going to meet the needs of that patient through our staff going into their home, or that patient coming back to one of our wards? And I think that is a dilemma and something that we're going to need to work through.
Thank you. Thank you, Ash and Debbie, for bringing this to the board today. It is an area of concern, as we often express, in terms of seeing those numbers on a monthly basis, often going in the wrong direction. And so, yeah, it will be interesting to hear what initiatives are underway and actually making some improvements for the future. Paul, do you want to bring us on to the finance report?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Can do. So the finance reports in the papers, just to pull through some of the highlights from the month, which was this report to the end of September. We're on track with our financial plan delivery year to date. So reporting 1.3 million surplus, which is to plan, and we continue to fully expect to deliver our forecast plan for the year, which is a 1.7 million surplus. You'll see from the summary table on page 193, we're hitting all of our financial target metrics for the year so far. Only one we're slightly behind on is the agency reduction target, where we're at 28% versus the 30% reduction target, which we're continuing to move closer to. And I think actually when we report to the board next time, we'll have hit that 30% reduction target, which is great. The position that we're currently reporting does include 0.6 million of income being clawed back from the ICB as part of the 1.8 million risk share agreement that we agreed with the ICB at the beginning of this year, which is effectively us covering off risk of ICB mental health savings not being delivered during the course of this year. We continue to work with the ICB on this. It's hugely challenging. I think the likelihood is probably within our reported position by the end of the year, although we will hit plan, we'll have absorbed probably about 1.7 million of clawback during the course of this year, which we'll have covered off non-recurrently by the end of March. Divisionally, all divisions, with the exception of mental health, are reporting controlling expenditure within the control totals that we set them. Mental health have got a couple of specific challenges around talking therapy, staffing costs, but also ongoing pressure from external placements. So specialist placement numbers are higher than we planned for the year, and PICU placements, although they've dropped to below the planned level, the cost or the rate per day that we're paying is higher than we built into the plan this year. So although the numbers are down, the costs are continuing higher than what we expected. Workforce continues to underspend with 2.4 million underspent on staff costs year to date, and that increased by a further 400,000 in September. If you look at our contracted numbers, they're up during the course of the year, but if you look at our work numbers, which includes our temporary staffing, we're broadly flat versus the number that we started with at the beginning of this year. And if we look at comparisons to last financial year in terms of temporary staffing, in terms of actual spend, agency, we spent 1.1 million less, and bank expenditure is 2 million down, which is really good. And like I say, apart from that 2% off the NHSE target for agency, we are where we need to be in terms of temporary staffing reductions. CIP continues on track, and we're utilising non-recurrent pay overspends and planned reserve releases to offset schemes that have yet to come to fruition or which are delayed and won't deliver to plan for during the course of this year. Capital expenditure, we've spent 3 million against a £6 million target for the year to date to the end of September. 1.2 million of that 3 million relates to Jubilee Ward, and is just due to phasing of when the programme is actually going to begin. We still expect to spend to plan on that programme by the end of March. A further 900,000 is timing on when leases were due to be signed, which will now probably not occur until Q4. And then the remaining £1 million underspend is across a variety of projects across the programme, both PFI and non-PFI. And again, we're expecting that we will spend to plan by the end of the year in terms of capital allocation. And finally, cash is slightly ahead of where we expected at 50.7 million, slightly aided by that underspend in terms of where we are on the capital programme year to date. Happy to take any questions, Mark.
Thanks ever so much, Paul. That was a good overview. Thank you for that. Any questions for Paul in terms of the finances? I know that Sonia does go through at FIP in great detail that feeds into this board, so I'm sure she's grilled you sufficiently in that. No, to come back for more. Sonia, you're mute.
I just wanted to acknowledge the results, Mark. It is truly managed to perfection. And really underpins being an outstanding trust. So I just want to acknowledge the entire team, that I have everyone here today on those results. It might be reported back, the numbers are on track, but to deliver that is truly outstanding. And everyone, I just want to pass on my gratitude to all staff that make this actually deliver all green, and I know they're going to get to 30% on that last metric. So Paul, to the wider organisation, my huge acknowledgement on this result.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I've got the pleasure of reporting the results so far, but it's the organisation that's pulling together and delivering what they need to deliver against those targets. So credit goes to them.
Thank you very much. Teresa, do you want to take us through the performance report?
Lovely, thank you, Mark. So there's a lot more detail in the report than I'm going to bring to your attention. But the first one I wanted just to update on is around rapid tranquilization. So we know we've been reporting and discussing that both in our QAC as well as in FIP in terms of it's an increasing position and has an impact on our NOF overview scoring. In month, we have had 40 incidents, which is one above our 39 target. And that has contributed, one patient had 17 of those incidents and 2 patients contributed to 16 of those incidents. So not big numbers, 6 patients in total. And the patient you'll note on Rose Ward, this is part of her agreed treatment plan, that rapid tranq is her preferred method of being treated. So still lots of work to do in that space. We've been able to do some retrospective reporting through the MHSDS to remove our oral medication that we were reporting as a restrictive intervention. So we should see an improved position in the second half of the year. But this target relates to rapid tranq specifically. Okay, So if I move on, then the other ones I wanted just to discuss in a bit more detail around our length of stay, and all of these linked to patient experience. So you'll see our older adult ward has a length of stay of 109.6 days against the target of 80, and an occupancy rate of 82%. That in part is because we've had 4 beds closed for renovation on Orchid Ward, but that work has now concluded. But it's good to see that overall there is a downward trend in that length of stay for our older adult wards. And then for our adult wards, so that includes Poppy Ward, our outsourced ward, we're at 38.7 days against the target of 42. So we've been green in month, and we've had a 4-month pattern of reduction of that length of stay. Maybe just note that actually that only counts if patients are discharged. So if we've had less discharges or any particularly long lengths of stay discharges haven't happened, that will be contributing to that reduction. We have got the increase in our lost bed days against adults and older adult beds of 548 days against our overall target of 250. So that's been read now, I think, for 7 months, and we're going to have to refresh our countermeasures. We've got it as a tracker. We did have it as a breakthrough objective, and we were green when we retired it. So there's some opportunity there to have a rethink. And against that, our occupancy rate for our acute beds was over 97%. They're very busy there. We talked about the assaults on staff. That was 56 against the target of 36. And then our last length of stay, sorry, I just wanted to pick that up, was our community hospitals. So their length of stay was 25.34 days against their target of 21 days. Their occupancy rate was at 89%. So we've had some concerns raised from our acute colleagues around occupancy being too low, but actually 90% through summer months is a reasonably good position. And last winter we saw an increased occupancy up to around 93-94%, and we would have envisaged the same this year. They've seen an increase in their lost bed days, so they were at 801 days against a target of 695. But again, there is a decreasing and downward trajectory when you look at it over time. So some good work there. And just a couple of others just to note is our I Want Great Care, but Debbie has shared earlier in the meeting some issues around the SMS messaging. So whether the number of people responding was at 8.4% against a target of 10%. But if the SMS weren't arriving, there's a reasonable risk that will have impacted. And the last one is our sickness rate at 4.3% against the 3.5% target. Julian noted it in his update, and there's some conversations around whether this moves now to a true north objective, and that we have some targeted work against our sickness rates. So any questions?
Any questions for Teresa? Sally?
Teresa, I wanted to ask you about Snowdrop Ward, and in particular this issue of increased physical assaults on staff. And I noted that the feedback from patients was to be treated with respect and dignity. Did that raise any sort of red flags with you?
So it's part of our culture of care work, Sally, trying to have hear about the experience from patients and from staff, and doing that triangulation as to what is driving both poorer staff experience, but also our poorer patient experience. We have a very, very difficult patient down on Snowdrop Ward who is tying ligatures and then running around the ward while staff are trying to reach her to remove the ligature. So it's not a tight ligature, but nonetheless it is a ligature, and a lot of those incidents are resulting in her flinging her arms, assaulting staff. So her preference is that she would like staff just to leave her to remove the ligature. And there's a complex case forum going on,
Right.
Sally, to work out what is the right threshold for intervention around this particular patient.
Right, because I was going to ask you a sort of follow-up question in terms of you've got snowdrop around, increased assaults, and then snowdrop in terms of increased length of stay. And I just want whether there were contextual factors around snowdrop or whether there was something around additional support for snowdrop. But from what you say, they've got some very acutely unwell patients there at the moment.
They have got some particularly challenging patients. We have got one of the nurse consultants, Sally, working with the ward on a daily basis, reviewing the care plans of all of these sort of particularly difficult patients, and working with the community teams around discharge plans for some of them. I think that we've seen an increase in risk during the admission rather than risk reducing the level of the admission reducing the level of risk. So I think there's some difficult complexity there, and onward placements for 2 particular patients that are really challenging for the teams.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tolu.
I think as part of an answer to that, some of the challenges is really how we support and encourage our staff in terms of taking some of those positive risks around those. There is a piece of document that we have just shared, a piece of work that was done in Mercy Care about what they have done in terms of addressing that particular client group. So we are going to be looking at that and supporting our PPH staff around actually how do we adopt a positive risk framework without actually becoming dogmatic around it, but using it as a support to address how we care for patients who are particularly complex and that staff find challenging.
Thank you, Tolu.
Thank you.
And thank you, Teresa. You clearly have some challenges in some of those areas, and it sounds as if you're taking the right actions. It'll be interesting to see how some of those cut through in the future, coming weeks. Thank you. Sonia, FIP update.
I mean, Mark, I think it's been so well spoken by Teresa and Paul. From my side, the one item that probably hasn't been raised here is that we've had the 5% increase in staff numbers to have 247 new staff while we've reduced our turnover rate from that down to 10% from 17%. I think it's absolutely extraordinary smart. So that was the one thing I did want to put in here, that balance and focus the team have of driving top quartile staff engagement alongside hitting all of our financials. And I know they will get full. I'm convinced it'll be 30% and be fully green by next month. I think it's, I just want to acknowledge that. And we had a real deep conversation as well on sick leave in the last FIP. So nothing further to add unless there's any questions. But, from my side, really feel real assurance in how the organisation is performing and the financial results that it's delivering.
Super. Thanks, Sonia. Any questions or points for Sonia? Well, she couldn't have given a better segue into the people and culture strategy update, having given those compliments to Jade and the team. Alex, do you want to set the scene in terms of the update report?
Yeah, I would just thank you to Jane for laying out really clearly the impact that the People Directorate is having working with our operational and clinical teams. And you can see in the first page some really good progress, and as Sonia said, around turnover. That was a key indicator for our stability, frankly, staff engagement alongside, and some of the key inequity indicators we've been driving improvements on. I think the highlights of the work to come are important for us because we've delivered through the people strategy quite significant impact is where we focus next. And if we just take casework as an example, that's a really important HR process indicator for us, but it's also a massive cultural indicator around how we treat people and we improve equity in terms of those impacted by formal processes. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes and whether there's any redesign that's proposed out of that. Jane is very wisely getting some external equity scrutiny to that process, so we'll have a really objective oversight of it. Just wanted to highlight that, and exciting opportunities potentially coming up around the replacement to the electronic staff record, where we may have the opportunity to be an early adopter, which would give us an end-to-end solution. Because the other things that Jane and team have been doing is focused on user and customer experience, and you can see that in the feedback from candidates and the recruiting managers. We've made really good progress around that. There's more automation and technology out there for us that we can adopt, so looking forward to that too. Jane, do you want to bring forward any other highlights from your view? We can take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Just a very quick run through some of the information that lies behind what we've given you there. So turnover, as you know, hovering around 10%. It's the lowest level that we've seen in our organisation, but it's low across the NHS. When we deep dive behind that, most of our leavers are not going to another job. They're leaving for work-life balance or they're retiring. And we have had a slight uptick, and we will see a slight uptick in turnover this month. And as we see some of our Mars leavers, so that's our people who took part in the mutually agreed resignation scheme, leaving. But otherwise, yeah, very comfortable with where we are with turnover. We talked about engagement. I know you've discussed the fact that we do see engagement across the NHS slipping. Our quarterly update, which was too late for this paper, is at 7.26 for our pulse survey. I've reached out to other organisations, including places like Midland Partnership, which traditionally have had very high engagement scores, and everyone is seeing the same slip. I think there's a national narrative around the NHS, and that's impacting on our staff. And we can really see that coming through now. A little bit about efficiencies. You were talking earlier about money. We've done a big review of where we could scale back, create some efficiencies in what we are doing. We think we've identified around 436,000 in cost reductions that we can make by the end of next year. And that's in line with the national demands for us to look at central services and central services costs. And we hope that we can do that and continue, to provide, the level of service that people are expecting from us. We've had lots of discussion with exec and with colleagues, around how best to manage those efficiencies. And I'll be really honest, my leadership team have been fantastic in terms of, developing those options and bringing those options to the table and co-creating, those possibilities. So some areas where we're looking not just at cost reduction but cost avoidance, things like our resus review about how do we deliver resus training, because our current model is relatively expensive, and again being co-creating that with clinical colleagues and with operational colleagues. Job evaluation, which is a national programme. We're using as an opportunity to update and modernise our job profile, not just our job profile, the job profiles that we offer, but our job descriptions, our person specs. And now we're in a stage where we're beginning to check those to see if we have updated and modernised these, how would that impact on recruitment as well? Because what we don't want to do is create job descriptions and job profiles which shortlist everybody. We need to make sure that they work as a screening tool as well. Interview questions in advance. Yes, that has now been launched. That has created some interest, shall we say, in the organisation. But that trial has started, and obviously we'll have 6 months review, and then we will give some more feedback. Linking in with Tolu in the work again on efficiencies. Tolu was very keen to work with us around direct engagement. We have awarded the tender for that, so that should save us some money on some of our agency bill for medics. We will be able to announce that on Friday. Sorry, I've just seen Tolu put his hand up. Did you want to say something in that one, Tolu?
It was just to address any potential concern around the huge agency costs for medics. One of the things we picked up was that there were some direct requests that were being made and some costs that were hidden within divisions where they were going straight to the agency. And so centrally we weren't cited. We have now closed off all of those gaps. So we are now cited that what we now have as at September is actually the true cost of actual agency for medics. And so working with a plan to have a clear pathway to reduce that over the next couple of months.
And though, just to support what Tolu is saying, we have seen agency costs reducing, and particularly in medical, where there's been a real push from Tolu, and not, again, our team have tried to support on that to recruit into vacancies. And as I understand, last month was the first month that we have met the agency target that we've been set. Anti-racism, we're being seen as an exemplar. I know, Alex, you've been out and the team have been out acting as a sort of showcase for the work that we have been doing. We still think there's a lot of work to be doing in this space. We don't think we're fully cooked yet, but others are wanting to learn from us, which is fantastic, and huge, hugely important that that work that we've been doing is seen as an exemplar. And then talent, we're doing mid-year reviews at the moment, and the focus for mid-year reviews is on trying to understand where people are in their talent journey. So we've got approximately 1,350 completed reviews. The deadline is the end of this month, and already we have information, on huge numbers of staff about, that for all of those people around where they want to be in terms of their career. And their career progression, whether they think they're growing in role, whether they think they're a professional, whether they're ready for growth, or whether they are now looking for their next job. And that was information we never had before. So, just to get 1,300, at this stage is going to be fantastic. And if we can get, more of those appraisals completed, we should get a relatively strong view of where people sit within the organisation. And then to link into that conversation that you were having with Debbie about career progression, we can then put in some dedicated support around talent management and supporting people in their career pathways. Alex talked about casework, and sickness has been discussed. And then, we have, we will this month formally apply to be an early adopter for the new electronic records, the ESR system, what they're calling the Future Workforce Solution. The rationale for that is that if we go early, although there are normally some issues when you go early, that you've got to undo the kinks in the system, it allows us to actually influence what the system may look like. And it also, we would get some extra support if we are an early adopter. We think we've got a relatively strong case. We've talked to Royal Berks about the impact that may have on us from a payroll point of view. Royal Berks are very keen that we go early so they can learn from us, and not go at the same stage as the main Royal Berks. They prefer to do it in 2 phases. So we feel relatively confident that we can make a case for us to be an early adopter, but we would find out in January, I think, whether we are an early adopter, and if not, what phase we will be going into. Just again to reassure board, I kept the People Directorate work plan relatively clear for next year to support this work if it goes ahead. If it doesn't, then we'll think again about where we want to continue to do improvements in line with the employee experience piece that Alex was talking about. But at the moment, I'm not wanting to block buckers too much in case we have to do that work. There we are. Any questions?
That was very comprehensive. Thank you, Jane and Alex, for that. Any questions for Jane or Alex? Sally?
Jane, the review of Band 4 and above nursing roles, the outcome of that review, is it likely to lead to perhaps people leaving or disengaging or sort of unrest? Because we've got large numbers of nurses, haven't we? So it's going to have quite an impact, I would imagine.
I don't think it will do. It's we've been working very closely with Debbie's team around all of this work. It's about tidying up the job descriptions rather than trying to change job descriptions, Sally. We do get a lot of questions from people saying, I think so-and-so's got a bigger job than I, and I'm doing the same job. It's about losing some of that noise, and because it's a nationally instigated scheme,
right,
the idea again is to make sure that we've got consistency. We reset the consistency between trusts as well as within our own trust, but at the moment relatively low key. Some, you know, if there are any discussions that come up or any issues, we'll obviously advise, but we don't think there should be major impacts.
There's no risk, right? Thank
Well,
you.
not at the moment. There are some discussions that have gone on around, you know, impacts, but we think we can manage everything we've got at the moment. Debbie, you may have a different view, but
no. I mean, for me, Sally, the issue we've got is over time we've got hundreds of different, say, band 5 job descriptions. Now there are national profiles for job description, and we shouldn't need that many, because actually most people's what they do day to day is actually within their sort of competency framework, if you like. So what we're just trying to do is move back to a position where we have a few, we've agreed about 12 JDs that everyone will use. So we don't have teams going off and inventing their own. They're there. We know that they're all aligned to the national profile for a band 5, for example, so that no one can say, well, actually, you know, I think I should be a band 6 because actually I'm doing X and this is what my JD says. So actually it should be helpful. I see this as being helpful to us as an organisation, actually. And staff will need, you know, when they're recruiting, will need to use one of the 12 we've got, and then obviously the competencies for the nuance of the job sit behind that overarching JD. So I'm expecting it to actually be helpful rather than a hindrance to us.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you for the report, Jane. It's much appreciated, and for all of the work that's going through. There is a number of things that you're keeping up to a really high standard, which we're grateful for. Paul, the estates strategy. I see that Martin's joined us on the meeting as well.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a kind of two-part. First part is going to be Martin's annual update on the current estate strategy and the work that the team have undertaken and delivered over the past year. And then I think much more importantly and more exciting is the estate strategy for the next 3 years, which Martin will take us through. So happy to hand over to Martin.
Martin, Martin, sorry to interrupt, just as a precursor, we've obviously had a chance to read through the report, so if you can pick out the highlights and the real issues that we need to be aware of or highlighted to us, that would be much appreciated.
Thanks, Mark, that's helpful. Did you want me to put the slides on the screen? Are you happy with the papers in the pack? I can just summarise.
On the screen might be useful for people to follow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that sharing now?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see if I can get this into slide format. I'm not sure I'm doing this right. Okay, we'll go with what we've got. So thanks everyone. This is the annual estates strategy update. In terms of achievements, or in terms of where we are this year, we've had some substantial achievements throughout the year in an ever-changing environment. Some key changes nationally have been the notice that NHS England is due to be abolished next year, and of course also the formation of the National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, which is relevant to the trust because that now takes over from the Infrastructure Projects Authority in terms of guidance around the national management of PFI arrangements. And we are in contact with NISTA around both of our PFIs at the moment. So we're just entering into the expiry period for West Berkshire. In terms of key issues nationally, the NHS backlog has grown by over 2 billion in the last year alone, which demonstrates the challenges around availability of capital to maintain the estate to meet current and future needs. More locally, the merging of our ICBs into a single Future Thames Valley ICB has potential to simplify some of our arrangements in terms of communication, having a consistent approach to delivery of service and expectations across the estate. Of course, neighbourhood health is an opportunity which has recently emerged that we're in early conversations around how that might impact upon the estate. In terms of achievements, we've been successful in terms of maintaining our position in our patient-led assessments of the care environment. There's a separate slide on that. And we've also undertaken some substantial efficiency savings across our estate through a combination of renegotiation of leases, getting better terms, and also reevaluation of the estate, either achieving rent rebates or rate rebates, should I say, and also reevaluation of the property asset values through the modern equivalent asset valuation scheme. So some substantial savings. We've also been looking at improving the estate in terms of utilisation. We regularly undertake utilisation surveys across our estate, and we've identified a number of opportunities to consolidate services onto a smaller footprint, with the aim of being able to both reduce the size of our estate, which obviously has cost implications, so we can better manage our costs, but we can also invest in those consolidated areas and improve the quality of the facilities that people work from. We've been very focused in our work on reducing patient risk, and so we have further developed the business case for Jubilee Ward and had a successful public engagement to agree the approach to move Upton Jubilee Ward over to St Mark's, and we're just finalising the details of that, and that's due to be delivered next August. Again, on the patient risk side of things, we've just had last Friday the official opening of the Place of Safety over at Prospect Park, and this will provide much improved facilities for some of the most vulnerable patients in our community. And we're also busy working with the SPV over at Prospect Park on the 3 handback surveys. So that's the condition survey, the fire survey, and the mental health survey, which form an important part of ensuring we get the buildings back in the expected state that we've contracted them to deliver them in. Aside from the patient safety side of things, we've also been looking internally at our succession planning, and we've recruited some new members to the team to address some of our succession issues and maintain the and improve the capacity and capability of the team. So in terms of place, as I mentioned, we still score first or second regionally and high up in the national rankings as well, which we're really pleased about, but not complacent. And we work closely with our partners, NHSPS and our other FM providers, to maintain those scores. In terms of compliance, we still have very high levels of compliance across the estate, and that's a careful balance of managing the high and critical risk backlog, and also ensuring that the operational services being delivered, such as cleaning, are being maintained to appropriate standards. In terms of the estate itself, we do have some challenges with the condition of the estate. The NHS property services, community hospitals, as an example, do have fairly substantive backlogs, and we do invest in those sites. St Mark's will be one of the sites that we invest in, obviously, when we bring across Jubilee. We'll be addressing some backlog issues whilst we're doing that. We're decanting a number of services at St Mark's as well, and we'll be improving the condition of those facilities for those services as and when we do that. In terms of sustainability, we've been busy across the patch introducing solar installations to a number of our properties, enhancing our EV fleet, and also enhancing EV charging at sites where where there's capacity to be able to do that. And we will be doing further work on that going forwards. We have a heat decarbonisation survey, which was completed last year and provides us with some really targeted advice in terms of where we need to make our future investments to make the most difference to our carbon footprint going forward. And more detail on that is in the recently updated Green Plan. In terms of benchmarking our services, we perform well against our peers and others. This is data from this year's ERIC return within Model Hospital, and it shows the trust in the second quartile here, this dark grey line. That's despite us having 2 PFIs within the portfolio, and of course PFIs do represent high revenue costs to the trust. So despite those PFI costs, we're performing better than our peers. There is some risk to that in terms of the forthcoming work with NHS Property Services and the unwinding of the historic BTA leases. In terms of ICB updates, we've got a number of projects which we're working on jointly with Frimley ICB, particularly around Bracknell Hub and the development of that Skimpid Hill site. There have been some delays on this ICB delivered project. It was originally expected to open in August this year. It's now, the latest information is that it's likely to be February next year before it receives patients. And there will be some refurbishment works to Skimpid Hill itself to address some fabric issues and water quality issues on the building and make it fit for the admin and support teams that will be located in Skimpid Hill, supporting those services operating out of Bracknell Hub. King Edward's has also had some work done to it through the ICB scheme. There's still snagging over there at the moment, but we're expecting handover of that early in the new year. And the Chalvey Medical Centre, which is a GP-led project, again, there have been some delays on that project, and we're currently being told that it'll be about February before we're able to move into that one. Over on the Bob side of the patch, we've completed successfully the consolidation phases 1 to 3 on Bath Road, which has enabled us to provide our MSK facilities in that area with fabulous new facilities. And we've been able to hand back the Delwood site, which wasn't fit for purpose and certainly shouldn't have had healthcare services being delivered out of it, in my opinion. The next phase, phase 4, will see the transfer of staff from Kremel Road to Bath Road. We're just working through the project at the moment on that. We're looking to have that completed by mid-April next year. That'll enable ourselves to hand notice to NHS Property Services, who will then hand notice to the commercial landlord. And there's a saving of about £500,000 a year to the system from releasing Kremel Road. So a significant contribution to the system's financial challenges. In terms of property services themselves, we've been on a journey with them. The relationship continues to develop, and we are working with them to look at longer term uses for our sites. There's a steering group for Upton, which has clinical representation, and that's looking to see what services are required there for the long term and what the art of the possible is in terms of improving those facilities on that site. There's an intention to also do similar at St Mark's once Upton's been confirmed. We've seen a improvement, I think, generally over the last couple of years in terms of the NHSPS compliance side of things. We have run some Gembas with them to get under the skin of what some of the compliance issues were reported as historically, and so we've seen those numbers improve over time. In terms of Prospect Park, we're well into the survey process. So we've got 3 surveys running at the moment. There's a general condition survey, a fire survey, and a mental health survey. The mental health survey is the first of its kind in the country. We were sponsored by DH to create this survey because there wasn't anything similar available to trusts, and we've been successful in getting the SPV to agree to fund the undertaking of that survey on the site, with a view to them also being liable for any non-conformities to the original design requirements that may be discovered by that survey. So that's a breakthrough really in terms of both having an understanding of where any mental health non-compliances might be or any risks might be, and in terms of them accepting liability for putting right anything that didn't meet the original design requirements. We're also undertaking a comprehensive contract reset at the same time. There's no point in fixing a building 8 years out if you don't have the systems in place to then manage it and keep it to the right standard. So we've got this comprehensive reset of the contract, looking at the way that services are being delivered and identifying the areas that are of key importance to us in terms of maintaining the buildings and delivering those patient-facing services that are so important. We have a board-to-board meeting on the 5th of December to review progress on that, with the intention of providing a steer to both the SPV and ISS to deliver the services on site. So basically assessing how they're performing at the moment in terms of delivering those changes, and agreeing next steps in terms of that reset. And as I mentioned earlier on, the place of safety was had the official opening on the 5th of December. We're looking to get patients into the facility probably around mid-December, I think. We've currently got some high counts of Legionella in the building, and we're working through with the contractors, getting those cleared before we do put the patients in there. Over at West Berks, we've been supporting Royal Berkshire in relation to their CDC project and also their MRI scanner, they've both made significant progress. So we're looking or expecting the contractors to set up on site for the MRI scanner next week. So that's a real step forward in terms of the difficult negotiations that have been undertaken with the PFI lender and their legal team. We have had notice earlier this year that RBH was withdrawing from Highclere ward, where they occupied half of the ward. It was very short notice, and they left the site at the end of March, I think it was. So we're now currently looking to commission a bed strategy with the operations directorate and some expert support on this to determine our long-term requirements for beds across the trust, and that'll help inform what we might do with that space going forwards. We are currently working on a feasibility study for putting a solar farm on the land adjacent to West Berkshire Community Hospital, and the intent of that is that that would be able to potentially provide green energy into the site going forwards, and obviously that will have a beneficial revenue effect over time in terms of reducing our utilities costs as well. As I mentioned at the start of this, we've just started discussions with NISTA as regards the handback process for West Berks, which is mid-2032. So I've outlined some key projects that will be taking place over the next year. And just finally, we've been also obviously working on the estate strategy, which is next on the agenda. And we took what I'd like to think is an inclusive approach to this in terms of breaking the strategy down into a number of work streams. We looked at we looked at a combination of the data around the estate's costs of each of the services, how space was being utilised, how we govern the management of space, the clinical services needs now and in the future, and Teresa and colleagues led on that from a clinical perspective. And then we had a work stream on sustainability as well, which again has fed into the overall strategy itself. And of course, the strategy is the next paper on the agenda.
Thank you, Martin. Do you want to go straight into the strategy and pick out the highlights of that document for us?
Yes, of course.
Paul had said that he had another commitment within HSE, so he's had to leave, but obviously you're fully conversant with it.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Share this.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. There's a national call, I think, about the outline financial settlements for next year. So it's important Paul just jumps onto that.
Yeah, he had warned me that might be the case, and I said that's more important in terms of getting that clarity of direction.
So in terms of the estate strategy itself, obviously there's a lot to it. Basically, there's a estate code gives guidance in terms of how an estate strategy needs to be written. It comes in basically 3 sections: where we are, where we want to be, and how we get there. Essentially, the 3 sections I've described previously. How we broke the strategy down into those 6 work streams. So we looked at it from a financial perspective, from a space utilisation perspective, governance perspective. Obviously, the clinical voice was extremely important, and how we can embed sustainability as part of what we do in estates. So in terms of the strategy itself, it outlines key achievements over the last 5 years. Sorry, is this sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Okay. As far as so the strategy outlines key achievements over the last 5 years against the previous strategy. For those of you that have been with the trust a long time, I think the change is tangible. We've disposed of a lot of poor quality property and replaced that with property of a much higher quality, more fit for delivering modern care to our patients. Sorry, I'll just get to the. You've seen some of these slides in the annual update, so I won't repeat them for you. Okay. So I think the key achievements are that within the space of the last 5 years, we've substantially increased the quality of our estate. We reported only a couple of years ago that our percentage of estate that was at condition B was 44%. We've been able to increase that up to 66% as we speak at the moment, and we intend to do further work to continue to improve that. We've disposed of a number of poor quality sites and replaced those with ones of much higher quality. And as part of our consolidation process, we've been looking to make sure that more staff and patients can benefit from those higher quality sites as well. Interestingly, our headcount's increased by 24% over the last 5 years, over the period of the last strategy, but we've been able to reduce our space occupied by 3% in the same time. So that's moving us from each individual occupying about 13 square meters down to about 10 square meters, which is around the national average. So we've done quite a lot to consolidate our sites, and that's had a obviously impact on in terms of the estate's costs as well. We've achieved a lot. I mentioned earlier on about some of the savings that we've been able to negotiate and rebates, etc., that we've been able to recover from negotiations and revaluations. So a substantial benefit to the trust from those pieces of work. And our property manager, our head of property, Mike Perks, was a runner-up for an award in the most recent staff awards for his work on the modern equivalent asset evaluation, which is he undertook with our finance team, and which is going to save us over £1 million a year off our revenue costs. So it's just worth recognising the work that some of the team are doing. In terms of critical issues, we still have obviously assets to replace. Jubilee Ward is a key risk which we report on regularly. We've done a lot of work there to address the fire risks on site, but nevertheless it doesn't really meet modern clinical needs. And as I mentioned earlier on, we're also looking to have that work starting at St Mark's at the moment, with a view to the transfer of the patients being around August next year. So this is coming out of trust capital, and we're splitting over 2 financial years to ensure that obviously we can support the project and do the other work we need to do as well. Kreml Road was already identified as being an unsuitable location for the services that were based there, and that will be moving to Bath Road. Again, by April next year, we expect that to happen. And we're also looking at what we're doing with Nicholson's House, which is currently in the middle of a shopping centre, which is due to be redeveloped into housing. So lots of work going on with the clinical teams around what their future requirements might be and suitable locations for them. And of course, in terms of critical issues, financial pressures are important to recognise. So there is limited capital to improve the quality of our buildings. We do need to focus on the most important issues and preserve as much of our finances as we can for the delivery of clinical services. So in terms of where we want to be, the clinical teams have set out their requirements in terms of what they're looking for. Issues such as adaptability were really important. They were highlighted. So being able to use space for different purposes or rapidly be able to change from one use to another as service needs changed. Efficiency and sound and space usage is something that we've incorporated into our space management policy, which is due for publication in the near future. And we've consulted widely on that to get a consistent approach and expectations around what staff can expect when they come into work. So there's a common standard around things like sharing both admin and clinical space, that kind of thing. So some of the themes that came out of the clinical services, the changing environment commissioning was an important one, and the work with neighbourhood services is going to potentially influence that further as we go forward. So early discussions have started with the Thames Valley ICB in relation to what that might look like, how we might bring services together and which sites might be suitable for that. And we'll need to follow that through in terms of, does that give us any opportunities for disposal of any of our other poor quality sites, or does it give us opportunities to bring other organisations onto some of our underutilised locations and get better use out of those. It was really important that the estate follows the clinical needs. Form follows function, and so we've emphasised that throughout the estate strategy. We've looked at where we've got opportunities, such as lease breaks or lease expiries, to be able to reconfigure the estate and dispose of properties that we perhaps aren't in the right location or may not meet future needs. There are some opportunities for clinical services expansion, and we've listed those out there. Veteran services, MSK, got inpatient mental health accommodation. We've currently got out of area placements, and that might be something that we would want to work through during the lifetime of this strategy, and potentially see if we can support the clinical teams to bring those onto Prospect Park or wherever might be appropriate for them within our own estate. And also working with primary care to help to support their delivery of their elements of the strategy as well. We'll just go towards the end. So we set ourselves some service principles. So this is how we're going to achieve these particular objectives. So we're going to use the opportunities of lease expiries, etc., to be able to right size the estate, introduce appropriate governance to prevent or to make sure that services that do need more space have got the funding, etc., to support that space going forwards, and that there's clear governance around the acquisition and disposal of space. Ensuring that we've got consideration of the environment in all of our projects. So we have introduced a sustainability checklist. So whenever we're looking at potential properties, we consider not just the building performance from a sustainability perspective, but we also look at things like the availability of public transport to help staff and patients get to the services, because we do know car parking is obviously limited on a lot of sites. We also look at things like the ability to introduce or expand EV charging capabilities, and a range of other measures that can, such as, for instance, being able to put solar onto the buildings, etc., to enable our environmental objectives to be supported when we take on properties. Additionally, and it's not mentioned in this particular slide, but we've also introduced a neurodiversity checklist. When the trust issued its neurodiversity strategy a couple of years ago, we really engaged with that process. We learned a lot from experts by experience, and in terms of the types of challenges that people with neurodiversity needs might have in some of our locations. So we now have a neurodiversity checklist, which is part of our design criteria that we look to implement whenever we're doing refurbs or taking on new facilities. And more recently, earlier on this year, we engaged with a company called Access Able, who did comprehensive surveys of our sites, looking at all types of inclusivity issues on our sites. They've got some guides for our patients and others who might use our sites. That will be linked into our forthcoming trust website. So patients or visitors to the sites will be able to plan their journeys ahead of time and know what facilities are there to support their needs. And they've also provided us with a survey report of where we can make some improvements to further improve that inclusivity. So in terms of the model itself, we've covered that off, that section. The NHS Property Services has a scoring matrix for categorising buildings, which is the core, flex and tail, and this is from their perspective whether they see the current stock of buildings being central to the delivery of healthcare services going forwards. So obviously that would be core. Tail would be your worst properties that perhaps need either significant investment or replacement, and then flex are properties where they're currently in use, but the long-term vision for them needs to be determined. And so we've been working with NHSPS to help inform their categorisation of our sites, and this forms part of the discussion with the Upton Steering Group, for example, around some facilities that we occupy that perhaps may previously have been categorised as tail, but are actually in a key geographical location for area. Just wanted to whiz off down to the end here. So we've outlined our capital programme, so our key areas of investment for the next 5 years. So these are projects that we're anticipating that we're going to need to invest in to address key issues identified either through the clinical teams or because there are building quality issues that we need to address. We've touched on the need to continue to maintain the capacity within the estates and facilities team, but also to expand on the capability. And we are looking ahead to when the PFIs do expire, and we will need to plan for whether we wish to continue to outsource the delivery of services on those sites, or whether we wish to bring those in-house. And there are obviously arguments to be made for both types of arrangement, but certainly as we head towards those handbacks, we do need to plan to have the skill sets in-house to be able to manage that. So again, in terms of key changes, we've just summarised at the end of the estate strategy a number of projects that are either in flight or planned over the life of this strategy across our sites. And that brings us to the end of the estate strategy. Just like to thank everyone that's been involved in the development of it. It's been a substantial piece of work for those involved, and welcome any comments or questions.
Thanks ever so much, Martin. If you want to take those slides down for the general discussion, could I just start by saying, as well as being very thorough, the document really impressed me in terms of this wasn't an estate, it's actually an organisational strategy in terms of how do we deliver those services, with whether it's the technology, the people changes, etc. And it feels if you've been able to weave all of those different aspects of our strategy together into this document, which from a reader's perspective is really useful and a great setting. So thank you for that. But can I open it up to questions across the table? It looks like you're going to get away with a very light touch there. So is there anything that you need from us in terms of now taking this through to implementation, or is it just simply the approval of the board in terms of what you've set out today?
Thanks, Mark. Yes, the approval of the board is really what we're looking for today. Obviously, we've got the appropriate governance arrangements in place for approving, capital investment and obviously the clinical direction of travel as well. So it's really the approval of the estate strategy to be published today.
And so, in the absence of any questions or queries requiring clarification, I think I can take it. Yep, there's a number of thumbs going up there. So no, thank you. You've got that approval. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Alex, the Trust Strategy Outcomes 3-year report.
Thank you, Mark. So there to note, we're in the final year of our 3-year strategy, and these are the outcomes that were agreed by the board. Good progress being made, some challenges on sustainability, environmental sustainability there. There's a challenging target. We take forward relevant outcomes into our forward strategy refresh. So this is here to note good progress in the last year, but we're live in our refresh of strategy, medium-term plan, reflections on the 10-year plan, and so on. So it's served a purpose of time.
Super, thank you. Any points for Alex or questions? In which case we remain with you for the self-assessment statement, which was contained in the board pack.
Thank you, Mark. This is to note publicly the review of our provider capability assessment that was considered our discursive session for submission to NHS England last month. So this is to note that submission, and we submitted green capability across all domains.
That was good to see. Thank you. Rajiv, Audit Committee meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. This was the Audit Committee 3 weeks ago, fairly standard agenda. We had all the usual assurances from anti-crime, internal audit, external audit. I'll just take the minutes as read.
Any points anybody wants to raise from the minutes? No, Paul was down for the Trust Seal report. Julie, was that a specific item that Paul was going to raise, do you know?
Sorry, no, it's just a routine one. Whenever we use a Trust Seal, we report it to the board.
Okay.
It was, yeah, it's just a lease.
That was a lease. Okay, we'll take that as noted then. Thank you. Council Governors update. I'll keep very brief. We've got a meeting with them tomorrow in London House. The involvement has been mainly focused on the chair recruitment exercise, with a number of governors participating in the stakeholder event, which I know I think all of the NEDs participated in. Is that right? Monday last week. And then the Appointments and Remuneration Committee, drawn from the governors, met last Friday in the formal final interviews of the chair candidates as well. And so we're now taking that to an extraordinary governors meeting tomorrow morning at 10:30 for ratification of the recommendation that's going to them, which hopefully will go through for approval. Which brings us to any other business from people today? No. In which case, the date of the next Public Trust Board is on the 13th of January next year, at which point I will pass a resolution that we exclude members of the public from the next stage of the meeting. Looking at the time, we've overrun, and I apologise for that.